appeared to tease the concept in front of baffled pool reporters, saying, quote, if you remember this, and it just a big...
You guys know what this represents?
Tell us, sir.
Maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storm?
Could be the calm before the storm.
It's like when just out of nowhere, just in a silent picture with a bunch of like generals on one side, and it looks like some staff members on the other side. It's the calm before the storm. I mean, that must have sent people crazy. So yeah, Cuba's launched 3 years ago in the wake of a scandal involving the prequel movement, Pizzagate. There's a theory about pedophile Democrats abusing kids in the basement of a Washington, D.C. pizzeria that was shot up. Since that case, there have been a series of incidents tied to Q followers that make the case for offline harm. Reporters are always talking about. For instance, an Illinois woman named Jessica Prim traveled to New York in possession of a dozen illegal knives, apparently with a plan to kill Joe Biden. Have you heard about the kids? Prim supposedly asked through tears while being arrested. QAnon followers have also been tied to a range of other deadly acts, from the trivial, a man raising a Q flag, a range of other acts, from the trivial to the deadly serious, which is a man raising a Q flag above his Cornish castle, to the deadly serious, which is a 24-year-old accused of shooting and killing a Gambino mob figure in Staten Island. The chorus of people complaining they've lost friends and family members to the cult-like movement is among the most upsetting parts of the Q story. It's not uncommon to hear about marriages thrown on the rocks after one member goes down the internet rabbit hole and begins to see the other as part of the narrative. It's really kind of tragic stuff. For all this, the Q band pulls the curtain back on one of the more bizarre developments of the Trump era, in the seeming about-face of old-school liberals who were once the country's most faithful protectors of free speech rights. I mean, think about what we're dealing with here. Like, this is kind of the cliche that we've heard from kind of these classical liberal types, like the Matt Taibbi's out there. Again, former guest on the show, someone who I think I really respect greatly, and great journalist, great writer, like the Glenn Greenwald type people, who even when you don't agree with them, you always have to double check yourself first. I think it's what it is. You're just like, are you really sure? But like this, I think I don't entirely see it. I mean, really what's happened is QAnon has really shifted away from kind of using euphemisms like protect the children or save the children or all these different codes they now have established. And of course, it's going to be hard to wipe them off completely, but they kind of have drifted away from the QAnon lingo online about a month ago anyway, so the Facebook bans probably won't be too much of an effect anyway, so to be quite honest with you. But for all this, the Q ban pulls back the curtain. I mean, it's really, I honestly think it is I really honestly think it's going to have to be a big problem before some really drastic action taken, and I don't think there's going to be too many figures, because obviously the counter argument for leftists on this is would you really want Al Jazeera or some kind of leftist news site like World Socialist Web or Telesur, a Palestinian Information Center? I mean, they're being removed, but in terms of the drastic level and in terms of the subject matter, the really big difference in equivalency going on, that is a big and I think drastic difference there. The argument is easy to understand, but misses the complex new reality of free speech in the internet era. It is true the First Amendment only regulates government bans. However, what do we call a situation when the overwhelming majority of news content is distributed across a handful of tech platforms, and those platforms are openly partners with the federal government and law enforcement in particular? In my mind, the argument became more complicated in 2017 when the Senate Intelligence Committee dragged Facebook, Twitter, and Google to the Hill and essentially ordered them to come up with a mission statement to explain about how they could possibly stop fomenting discord, was, I think, the term that they used there. Platforms that previously rejected the idea that they were in the editing business. We're a tech company, not a media company, Mark Zuckerberg said before in a 2016 after meeting with the Pope. Soon we're agreeing to start working together with Congress, law enforcement, and government-affiliated groups. which gets to this is, I think, where the scariness begins to kind of creep in. Whatever the reason for this about face, the tech companies now work with the FBI in what the Bureau calls private sector partnerships, which involve strategic engagements, which includes threat indicator sharing. I mean, with this kind of stuff, though, I think, like, while a lot of the stuff, I mean, I'm not going to get too worked up about the QAnon ban. There is no doubt that what he's saying here, that the broader point that so much of Facebook, like in Facebook and these tech companies, are a threat to our democracy, a threat to our way of life, and a threat to the way we process and interact with each other on such a macro scale that I don't think we've really processed it yet, and I think it's going to take a long time before we really start to. Yeah. So, anyway, we are now going to turn the page to our final story. Talking about the Michigan militias, folks. The news that 6 Michigan militia members, now I think it's up to 13 now, this is again Prospect reporting on this, have been arrested for planning to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, the state's Democratic governor, whose COVID precautions upset manly Trumpians, caused me to flashback to a 1996 campaign I was covering from the LA Weekly. This is again in Prospect, written by Harold Meyerson. I was spending the better part of a week on the trail with Pat Buchanan, the proto-Trumpian, Putin-loving, nativist, racist, paleo-fascist during his boyhood. His family supported Franco's overthrow of Spain's elected government, who was running an inflammatory Republican primary campaign against Bob Dole for the party's presidential nomination. As Goldwater heralded Reagan, Buchanan heralded Trump. The event that still stands in memory took place one afternoon in a venerable auditorium in Bay City, Michigan. Like all of Pat's events, the attendees were not only all white, but quite a number of them showed up wearing military fatigues, eager to show that they'd been enlisted in Buchanan's Cultural War. One fatigue wearer was so eager to demonstrate his zeal that he stood at attention in the front of the row of the auditorium's balcony seats for the entirety of Pat's speech, behind the American flag that he draped over the railing. And like all Pat's events, this one largely featured generic obscenities that some of the crowd hurled the traveling press when we entered the hall. Virtually no elected officials supported Buchanan's candidacy, so the drill at Bay City, as at the other campaign stops, was to have the campaign's county chairman, and they were, of course, invariably male, introduce the campaign's state chairman, who proceeded to introduce Pat. Such introductions were generally pro forma, but not in Bay City, where the county chairman had a gaunt, haunted look, much like a half-lit John Carradine in some 1940s horror movie. That impression grew stronger when he began to speak. The problem is socialism, he began, only he said it in German, and he quickly translated it into English. No one in the crowd blanched, of course. The redder the meat, the better. Indeed, they whooped and hollered at their approval, but there was one group, besides the press, that grew concerned. Buchanan's traveling staff were not really these kind of old, deeply diseased culture war people, but they were really a bunch of frat boys from right-wing colleges for whom such events had become so routine they long stopped paying attention to what anyone was saying. But the German introduction caught their attention. Their heads swiveled and they rushed to consult one another. They furiously whispered into each other's ears. What if that guy did a Heil you-know-who salute? What if he led the stage in a chorus of Deutschland über alles? Did anyone have a hook to drag him off stage? Could they really clamp down? After a few more nerve-wracking minutes of ranting about the socialist threat, which Republican frontrunner Dole previously obviously personified, the county chairman finally relinquished the stage. The frat boys heaved sighs of relief and went on looking for whatever beer provisions came in handy. The guy in the balcony remained at attention, which is one reason why today's news of right-wing extremism in Michigan didn't come as a total surprise to me. That's from Harold Meyerson in the American Prospect, talking about back on the trail, talking about the same people and the same makeup of those people, bringing the same kind of the same ideological makeup kind of coming to the fore today in the Trump campaign, and really underrooting deep parts of the kind of psychological Michigan right-wing political culture. That's all we got for Newsflash. Uncultured later. It's going to be Friday, October 9th. We'll have an episode of Uncultured for you out. So we'll see you then. It's been Newsflash.